You all know about Hitler, but just like Hitler, a dictator was born in Africa. Hitler was an enemy of the Jews, and this African dictator targeted Indians. He destroyed 90,000 Indians in 90 days. Hitler used to say, I am chosen by destiny. This African Hitler used to say, God spoke to me. Both of them felt he is a God sent person. Hitler destroyed Germany by plunging it into war, and he destroyed Uganda by plunging it into hatred. This African Hitler was named Idi Amin. He was the dictator of the African country of Uganda. Today's story is about this dictator who spread hatred towards Indians to such an extent that his own country, Uganda, was completely destroyed. This was the same Idi Amin who kept the severed heads of his enemies in his fridge, who used to say that Hitler's actions were not bad. Why did Idi Amin, who rose from a cook to a military commander and then staged a coup, hated Indians? Who was Idi Amin and how did he turn Indians who had lived there for centuries into enemies and label them bedbugs? Today, I'll tell you the story of Uganda's dictator Idi Amin and his atrocities against Indians. Watch the video until the end because if you don't know your history, how will you know yourself? The year was 1972, the month was August. An announcement came on the radio in Kampala, the capital of Uganda. The announcement was for Indians. Throw these blood sucking parasites, bedbugs, out of the country. And at that very moment, chaos erupted across the country. Just 90 days remained, and 90,000 Indians were forced to leave the country. This order was given by Uganda's butcher, Idi Amin. His decision wasn't made on a whim, but rather the result of years of growing resentment. You will learn why Idi Amin threatened to expel these Indians and the rest of Asians from his country. And what exactly were these Indians doing on African soil? So let's head to Uganda, the African country. If you open a map of Africa, you will see a small country on its eastern side, Uganda. Indians arrived in this small country surrounded by Rwanda, Congo, South Sudan, Kenya, and Tanzania long ago. These Indians came here not as a result of migration but as a result of British greed. In the late 19th century, around 1890, when Africa was being divided among European countries, the British Empire sought to expand further into Africa. Uganda was also included in this division. Laying a railway line from Mombasa, located on the Indian Ocean coast, to Kampala, the capital of Uganda, was the British biggest project. This project was called the Eastern African Railway Project. The British needed cheap labor, and this was the time when they had tightened their grip on India. So, they brought in hard-working, cheap, and reliable laborers from India, in whose hands the fate of Uganda's railway line would be written. But as always, the British were only looking out for their own interest, and because of this, they were about to do something that would turn the people of Uganda into enemies of Indians. Between 1895 and 1901, approximately 32,000 Indian laborers were sent from India to East Africa. These people, mostly from Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Punjab, were among them. Many were seeing the sea for the first time in their lives. These laborers, who went on 2 years contract, built the Ugandan railway, and some of them settled there. And gradually they entered into business. These laborers were both hardworking and reliable, so they prospered rapidly in Uganda. Wealthy Indians became shopkeepers while Africans continued to work on farms, and the British intervened. In the early years of 20th century, these Indians completely transformed Uganda's economic landscape. They began to dominate Uganda. While the African population was primarily engaged in agriculture and labor, Indians took over everything from small shops to large import and export businesses. But just as the British played a game of divide and rule in our country, in India, a similar game was played in Uganda also. Before leaving, they had divided society into three parts: Europeans at the top, Asians means Indians in the middle, and local Africans at the bottom. This inequality was the seed that later gave leaders like Idi Amin the opportunity to spread hatred in the name of justice. The story of Idi Amin is the story of a man who used poverty, the military, and politics to reach power. Born around 1925 in Koboko, a region in northwestern Uganda, Idi Amin grew up in a difficult environment. His father was a farm laborer, his mother a local doctor, and he dropped out of school as a child, but possessed a strong physique. The 6 foot 4 inch tall soldier later became a coup launching dictator. In 1946, Idi Amin was drafted into the King's African Rifles by British Army. Although he wasn't very educated, he was extremely brave and obeyed his superiors. British officers saw him as a capable soldier. He participated in several campaigns in Kenya and Somalia. After the British left, Uganda gained independence in 1962, and gradually the Ugandan army began to come under African control. Milton Obote was the Prime Minister of Uganda and Idi Amin was one of his trusted officers. By this time, Idi Amin had become a colonel. Obote also promoted Amin numerously because he needed a strong, loyal figure in his army. But history bears witness to the fact that when power and guns are held by the same person, loyalties quickly shift. In 1970, Amin was appointed commander of all three armed forces. During this period, he embezzled military funds to such an extent that Obote was forced to dismiss him. Before this could happen, Idi Amin staged a coup and seized power himself. In 1971, while Obote was on a foreign trip, Idi Amin staged a coup. He announced on the radio that the army had taken over to rid the country of corrupt leaders. I have taken up the responsibility. In just a few hours, Idi Amin went from an army officer to the ruler of Uganda. Initially, people thought this change would be good for the country. Troubled by the corruption and the country's deteriorating conditions, they believed Amin would solve their all the problems. Amin also immediately increased the army salaries, freed some people from prison, and began calling himself the leader of people. But as saying goes, a wolf cannot hide for long in a lion's skin. The same fate befall Idi Amin. He began calling himself anything. Your Excellency, Life President, Big Daddy. Moreover, he called himself King of Scotland. His madness was evident in his every decision. He used violence as his weapon to intimidate and silence people and maintain his power also. At Kampala's renowned Makerere University, once considered Uganda's intellectual center, Amin banned political debate and discussions. When students protested, Amin sent the army into the university to intimidate them. But no one knew that he would soon make a decision that would devastate the entire country's economy, and that his decision would destroy Uganda itself. Idi Amin had two faces, one that appeared humorous to the public, and the other that was ruthless, violent, and bloodthirsty. The exact number of people killed during his rule never been ascertained. Some reports estimate the number of deaths at 80,000 to 3 lakh. These deaths were not just murder but planned genocide. In 1962, when Amin was part of the British Army's 4th KAR unit, he carried out a horrific massacre in the Turkana region of Kenya. Villagers were beaten and many were buried alive. A few weeks after coming to power, he locked 32 army officers in a cell at Kampala's Makindi prison and blew them up with dynamite simply because they were supporters of Obote. He gradually purged his own army. Approximately two-thirds of the soldiers were executed in the first year. To control the public, Amin created four separate secret agencies across the country: the military police, the presidential guard, the public safety unit, and the Bureau of State Research, whose job was to capture, torture, and kill people. Amin's rule was the most horrific period in Uganda's history, one where humanity had no value. He began giving himself strange titles like His Excellency, President for Life, Lord of all the beasts of the earth and fishes of the sea. He claimed that God commanded him in his dream. For him, power was not a matter of service but a divinely granted authority. In this way, Idi Amin began portraying himself as the god of Uganda. But power couldn't be achieved simply by this. To distract the people from the real issues, Idi Amin was now looking for a new enemy. This is a characteristic of dictatorial regimes. Dictators need an enemy they can use to gain public support. This time, he found those enemies in Indians who had been the backbone of Uganda's economy for decades. These Indians were now the easiest target for power. 90,000 Indians were living there. Some of them held British passports, also known as British Asians. The Asian community remained somewhat isolated from Ugandan society with their own schools, temples, and neighborhoods. However, the economic class divide later became a racial and political divide. Soon, Amin began saying in his speeches that these Asians are sucking the blood of Africa. He declared that Uganda would only achieve true independence when its economy was in the hands of Africans. Meanwhile, when the public saw that Asians were wealthier than them and lived in better homes, they saw this inequality and, instead of questioning the government, began to view Indians and Asians as their enemies. Gradually, Idi Amin created an atmosphere in which hatred was labeled patriotism. The plan to expel Indians was no longer just a thought, it became a political weapon. And with this weapon, Idi Amin legitimized his dictatorship. Capitalizing on this legitimacy in 1972, he declared on the radio, God told me to expel Asians from Uganda. These people were threatened to leave Uganda within 90 days. In his speeches, Amin called Indians bloodsuckers and economic exploiters. This sparked an atmosphere of hatred throughout the country. Newspaper headlines read, Uganda for Ugandans, and posters appeared on the streets, send the Asians home. Crowd of people began gathering outside the shop. Those who once bought their goods from the same Indian shop were now ready to rob them. This was followed by another order from Idi Amin. Each Indian was allowed to carry only 55 pound, means about 700 rupees, in cash. Everything else, houses, shops, bank accounts, vehicles, was declared the property of Ugandan government. The army and police intimidated those who dared to protest. Incident of violence and kidnapping increased, forcing many families to abandon their hard work and their identity. For Idi Amin, these people were insignificant in comparison to power. Approximately 90,000 people of Indian origin were forced to leave Uganda. Some returned to India while others sought refuge in countries like Britain, Canada, and Kenya. Britain provided asylum to approximately 28,000 Indians. Many returned to Britain and India, but India was embroiled in Bangladesh crisis at that time. So assistance was very limited. Well, within 90 days, Indians were wiped from the streets of Uganda. Shops that once had Patel stores or Singh and Sons now had government signs that read property of the Republic of Uganda. Now, friends, Idi Amin had done this, but was this the end of hatred? The answer is no. In fact, this was the beginning of Idi Amin's true dictatorship. After the Indians left, Uganda was temporarily deserted. Markets fell silent, shops closed, and the economy began to collapse. Those who once ran businesses were replaced by army officers and Amin supporters. But no one knew how to trade, and within a few months, Uganda's economic situation collapsed completely. But Idi Amin was only concerned with his increasing power. Gradually, his government transformed into a dictatorial machine where fear was the law. No one knew who would disappear the next morning. It is said that between 1971 and 79, nearly a half million Ugandans were killed or disappeared. This figure was not the result of war but of a dictator's whims. He had his opponents, teachers, doctors, journalists, even his own ministers eliminated. Anyone who questioned him would disappear. During this period, rumors have spread that Idi Amin ate the flesh of his enemies. Most importantly, while he never admitted this, he never denied it either. Well, Amin built his dictatorship on a formula of hostility and fear. First, Indians and Asians became his enemies, then his own Africans who opposed him, and finally, he turned even his fellow soldiers into enemies. He knew that fear was his greatest weapon. But history shows when a regime relies solely on fear, its downfall is also rapid. Amin's downfall had already begun, but no one knew when that day would come. By 1978, Idi Amin's power was faltering. Discontent within the military had grown, the economy was devastated, and the people were living in hunger and fear. Amin, however, seemed unwilling to accept this reality. To save his dictatorship, Amin attacked Tanzania. In response, Tanzania captured Kampala, forcing Amin to flee overnight. He first fled to Libya, where Gaddafi briefly granted him asylum. However, as international pressure mounted, Amin was forced to leave there as well. Finally, Saudi Arabia granted him asylum, citing humanitarian reasons, but with the condition that he stay out of politics. Thus, the butcher of Uganda was forced to stay away from Uganda. Idi Amin spent nearly 24 years in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. It is said that he did not live a luxurious life of a dictatorship there. Many of his children grew up there. He never publicly expressed remorse for his actions. When asked in an interview if he regretted anything, he said, I have no regrets, I only miss my people and my country. Idi Amin died in Saudi Arabia in 2003. At that time, it was not sad news for the people of Uganda. It was a closed chapter. A man who once called himself Lord of the Earth finally died anonymously in a foreign land. So, friends, this was the story of Ugandan dictator who talked about driving out Indians. We read and remembered Hitler's story, but we forgot Idi Amin's. But history isn't something to be forgotten. It's something to teach us. So I hope you would like this video. If you like the video, please share and like the video and subscribe for more such content.